The nature-nurture debate questions to what extent our behaviour or personality is governed by our inherent nature, for example through our genes or through our upbringing and other environmental influences. There is no scientifically correct answer to this question, and there are a wide variety of opinions. Scientific studies are being performed all the time that contribute towards this debate, and there are constantly changing ideas from the scientific community and current news articles that offer more data. The debate is highly relevant to the issue of whether or not we are free beings. This is because it involves an assessment of the arguments for determinism. When we refer to the nature-nurture debate, it is vital to understand what this means. By the term nature, we mean the characteristics or qualities that we inherit genetically. These are characteristics that we are born with and may relate to our genetic makeup. We would have these qualities regardless of our place of birth or the type of upbringing that we have, and they are traits that may appear as we grow. This is sometimes called nativism, in that we are talking about innate characteristics that are independent of our environment. For example, hair colour and eye colour, gender and so on are determined by the genes that we carry. The term nurture relates to the environment that we are raised in. Our nurture can begin from conception whilst in utero. Whether our birth mother drinks or smokes will affect our development, whether when we are born we get stimulation or are left alone. This will depend on all sorts of things, but can include things like our economic background, the media that we are exposed to, our friendships and parental involvement. Some nurture experiences are shared within a family group, and some factors will be individual and unique to the person. For a long time, nature was considered to be the overriding influence on human behaviour. Darwinism in science and the work of the English Victorian Francis Galton in psychology show us that it was through eugenics or better breeding that we can eliminate undesirable conditions and encourage desirable ones. This, of course, is what we do when breeding animals to have certain characteristics, such as if we want them to run faster or produce more milk. The work of Adolf Hitler applied these kinds of principles with the idea of ethnic cleansing, and it is a principle explored in the film Gattaca, in which it becomes illegal to reproduce naturally in the interest of avoiding defective genes. Other research has shown that in fact nurture plays a bigger part in making us who we are. Watson's psychological study claimed a link between social class and intelligence. In fact, he claimed that regardless of their genetic makeup, a child could be trained to become anything at all, provided they have exactly the right stimulus. This simple binary-style choice has faded more recently, so that a more equal weighting can be given. There are still things like eye colour that can be said to be genetically inherited, but even genetically inherited diseases are not always wholly explained with reference to genes. For example, a study reported by the National Geographic included a study of identical twins. In this study, it was clear that genetically inherited traits count for a lot. Identical twins who were separated at birth and raised apart on reuniting as adults were discovered to have made virtually identical life choices, look identical, and possess remarkably similar characters. However, it was noted that whilst these were twins formed from one fertilised egg which split in half at the early stages of development to form two beings, it was not the case that every feature of their makeup was as identical as you might expect. Female twins Diana Bozza and Deborah Faraday, included in the study, showed one sister with early onset Alzheimer's, which was due to a genetically inherited cause, but the other twin was unaffected. Genetic studies cannot reveal a genetic reason for such differences in these twins, nor why some sets of identical twins are completely different in character. It seems instead that genes have a relationship with our nurture or environment, and they may become active or dormant depending on whether or not the environment makes them so. In the Peter Joseph Zeitgeist film series, a number of experts were consulted with reference to the impact of genes or environment upon a person. An example is given of a child who is born with genetically perfect good eyes, who is then placed in a darkened room. If this were to be the case and they remained in a darkened room for 5 years, then they would end up blind for the rest of their lives. This is because the eyes need a certain light stimulus in order to develop, and without them they cannot. Thus, it is a combination of nature and nurture that bring a child to blindness or sight. Studies into violent criminals demonstrated that many people who commit violent crime have themselves been victims of severe child abuse. The way that our physical bodies function and our neurological functioning of a human being cannot be separated from our environment. A study by researchers at King's College London showed the extent to which you are affected by your genes or environment is partly determined by where you live. Some areas of the country seem to be environmental hotspots for certain genetic traits. The message gained from this study was that genes are not necessarily your destiny, and that there are many things which affect how your genes express themselves. So, what does this mean for religion? Human nature is God-given. God is our efficient cause. Human nature should affect human behaviour. The fall, inherited sin, may seem to affect our human nature. We are born into a fallen world and are therefore free only to sin if Augustine is to be believed. This is our nature because it doesn't matter what we do to try and change this, we will be unable to. We thus rely on God's saving grace through the atonement for freedom from it. On the other hand, if environment affects our decisions, maybe God is not omnipotent and we can influence things ourselves. For Buddhists, I am the product of all my previous lives, thoughts, ideas and experience. There is no fixed I or self, only my nurture. The God gene suggested our ability to have a religious experience may be genetically inherited. A study of twins raised apart claimed that religious upbringing fades in influence over time, but genes may contribute at least a proportion of religious inclination to a person. If this is true, faith would not be a matter of free choice, and we would not be capable of judging a person based upon their faith, since they would be genetically predisposed to it. This is a reductionist argument. Such a gene would make it less likely that there could be an objectively existent personal God, or it could suggest that God has given some the ability to recognise him.